Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto from Dogworks Radio, and you are listening to our Mushing Radio segment. Today I am joined by Alex Stein, and we are talking about the recent news of doping and the mysterious Musher X in last year's Iditarod. Here we go.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Everybody, this is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here at KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com and Apple Podcasts. Just search for Dogworks Radio. Make sure you check us out on social media under Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the like. Just search again for Dogworks Radio. And calling in today is our co-host from California, Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going?
It's going very well, Robert. I believe it's a Chinese curse or a Japanese curse. May you live in interesting times. And things have certainly gotten very interesting. The story that we talked about last time has been spreading. Several people sent me articles that appeared on NPR's site, and ESPN has picked up the story. So we are back again. There's some breaking news and some new stuff. And basically, to bring everyone up to speed, what happened is a couple weeks ago, the Iditarod Trail Committee announced that there had been a positive test of one of the finishing teams, and then they had changed the rules for next year about drug testing and disqualifications. And basically, it was that under the rules for the 2017 race, the Iditarod would have to be able to prove that it was the intent of the musher to use a prohibited substance. And under the new rules, the musher will be called before a committee and basically will have to make the case that if there was a prohibited substance that came up in the drug tests, that it was not their fault, or they would, as Mitch Seavey said, they would basically have to have the burden of proof to prove that they had not done that. So the new bit of news that came out in the past day or so, and there's great reporting on this on the Alaska Dispatch news site from Tegan Hanlon and from Craig Medred at craigmedred.news. But basically, the ITC announced that the substance that they tested, that they got a positive test for, was Tramadol, which is a pain reliever that's given to dogs. It goes through the system relatively quickly. They said that it was from a drug test that took place in Nome, so it was one of the top 20 teams. And after the 20th place, they don't drug test the dogs in Nome. Once again, they drug test all of the dogs at the start. Then they do random testing on the trail, and then they drug test all of the dogs that finish in the top 20 teams. So they said that it was one of the top 20 teams, and because of this drug and how quickly this drug exits the body, they said that it would have had to be something that was given to the dogs at White Mountain or further on. So there's a mandatory 8-hour rest at White Mountain, and then generally teams will, then it's 77 miles from there to Nome, which generally teams will, finish in under 10 hours. So there's another checkpoint at safety, which is 22 miles from Nome, but generally teams don't spend very much time there. And anyone who knows about Tramadol would not have given it to a dog after White Mountain because they would know that they would be tested for it and it would come up positive. The wrinkle in this, well, there's a couple wrinkles, but one of the things is that the dogs are not tested immediately when they finish. And in this case, I believe the dogs were tested several hours later. You talked last time about the, what they would call, if this were a police procedural, the chain of custody for the drug tests, which apparently is not as airtight as one would expect or want. So it's possible that this drug test was up to, I think they said 6 hours after the finish. And usually what happens is after the finish, the dogs go to the dog lot, the musher stays with the dogs, gets them situated, and then typically will go and get some sleep or get something to eat. So the dogs are there in the dog lot, and there are volunteers who supervise things at the dog lot. So it's possible that a volunteer could have inadvertently given the dogs this drug, although it's strange to me that they would give dogs what essentially is a pain relief drug without the musher's knowledge. Or some people have said that it's possible that this was an act of sabotage and that the drug was given to the dogs knowing that they were going to be drug tested. Then there was a statement that and the ITC has still not named the musher whose dogs tested positive, saying that they couldn't prove that there was any intent, and as far as they were concerned, the situation was over. But then they changed the rules and alluded to this positive drug test when they announced the rule change. So the musher in question, the musher who knows that it was his or her dogs who tested positive, issued a statement to the Iditarod official Finishers Club that then was released to the media, where the musher in question talked about how the Iditarod handled this, and that they were contacted by the head veterinarian and the race marshal, and that they were told that they suspected it was either an accident with a volunteer giving the dogs this substance inadvertently, or something involving foul play, or something in one of the food bags that they couldn't monitor after the end of the race. And then this statement was released to the media, so it's really placed kind of a cloud over the entire race, because no one knows who this musher is. There have been a lot of rumors about it, a lot of people pointing to one person or another person. We still don't know at this point. Nobody has said that this musher is guilty of anything. And in fact, the musher had offered to take a lie detector test and was told by the ITC that the matter was closed. But now, by publicly saying that there was this positive test, they have sort of opened it up again. And that, I believe, is pretty much where we are right at this point.
Thanks for the synopsis there, Alex. Of course, I have several thoughts, and maybe we can talk about them as we move forward. This is going to be a 30-minute show for folks that are listening, that just so we can get it on the radio program, so we can't go really far into depth. But my first inkling or my first opinion on this is there has to be a reason why this musher has not come forward. I find it really difficult to believe that if it was an accident or if the drugs were given after the race while the dogs were in the dog lot, and then he or she left the dog lot and like you said, went to get some sleep or grab something to eat or whatever. I just don't think that it was. First off, I don't think it was sabotage, especially if it was in Nome, because all the people already know that the dogs are going to be tested. So I just think it's not an act of foul play or sabotage. Secondly, I find it really hard to believe that that the ITC would allow something like this to happen in their control, so to speak. So, I mean, you had mentioned volunteers giving dogs drugs or whatever. It's very possible that the handler were to give medications or supplements to a dog, but I just don't think that the ITC would allow volunteers to give dogs drugs. My second point on this, and then maybe we can talk about it before I list my last point, is, as I mentioned in our previous episode that we've titled "The New Iditarod?" and when we talked about this as well as the purse and the payouts for and sponsors to the participants, is the collection method. It has always been a very lax collection method. I indicated on our previous show how they did that, where they put a baggie, kind of zip tie or a Ziploc baggie that's kind of rubber band around a male dog and collect it that way, or they try to collect it in a cup from a female dog, and that just seems very lax in the way that they do it. As you mentioned, Alex, it is not a uniform time that they do the test. It could be, almost immediately after the dogs come into Nome or up to several hours. When you have 20 teams coming in with potentially up to 10 dogs, 12 dogs, whatever, finishing in a team, that's well over 100 dogs in the dog lot, and it takes quite a bit of time, several minutes, I would imagine, per dog team to be able to do that. So if there's 20 teams in the lot, well over an hour or two to correctly collect the samples. So I think that the collection method is one of the main reasons why they cannot enforce this as if they should. And, of course, we could go into speculation about, when, how, what, et cetera. But those are my first 2 points. Do you have anything to add on those?
Yeah, just briefly, there was some speculation about, we know that in order to finish the race legally, you need to have 6 dogs. So there was some speculation, I believe Craig Medred wrote a little bit about this, about teams that did not have many more than 6 dogs, and is it possible that this was given to some of these dogs to make sure that they would be able to make it to Nome, given to them either at or right before, or maybe even a little bit after White Mountain, in hopes that they would be finished they would be finished and the drug would be out of their system. That's certainly a possibility. It's a possibility that I don't really like to think about, because that is very clearly I think cheating and really going against what the ideals of the race are. I saw also there was something that you mentioned last time that I just want to bring up again. We had a few years ago someone who was disqualified and named and immediately named for breaking the rule about having an iPod Touch, and it doesn't seem. A lot of people have been saying it doesn't seem right that they are not revealing the name of the musher, or as you said, that the musher hasn't come forward and given some sort of explanation.
Right. My thought on that is, number one, at the time, it was not a rule that has been broken. There wasn't a rule into effect, so to speak, with a penalty per se. So if a rule hasn't technically been broken yet, they can't really enforce a rule that's not in place, at least my opinion. Unlike the iPod or the communication device, as they called it back then, there was a clear and distinct rule that said, if you're caught with this, this will happen. And I don't think the current rule, or the rule up to this point, said something of such. A little bit about Tramadol in and of itself. Yes, it is a pain reliever. I've given it to my dogs on many occasions over the last 20 years or so that I've been involved with mushing. I've been prescribed by many vets over the years for pain relief for injured dogs or sore dogs or dogs that are coming home from surgery, etc. But one thing I would like to mention, and I know that it is illegal and I know that it should not be done, but Alex, how many times when you have been exercising, doing whatever you do, and you're going out for a run or a bike ride or whatever, and you have that nagging sore quad muscle, and you decide to pop a couple of Advils before you go out on your bike ride or whatever you're doing, with hopes that it will alleviate some of the pain as you head on down your own trail, whether it's on a bike or a walk or a run or whatever. Has that ever happened in your case?
Oh yeah, definitely. And since I've been doing Taekwondo training, there were a lot of times where my legs or my feet would just get very, very sore, and I would have some Advil or I don't think it was ever anything stronger than that, but I certainly, since I started doing Taekwondo training, have used that particular pain reliever a lot more than I ever had before.
Right. And I am assuming that this was an oral tablet for this drug, the Tramadol. A very common way to administer drugs to sled dogs is they eat what we call a sled dog soup. I call it gruel, where we mix the meat and the kibble and other things involved in it to make almost a soupy mixture. Very commonly, we'll just pop the pills right down into that soup, and they will eat the pill as they're eating the meal. So it's not this long, drawn-out process where they have to take multiple steps to administer, most commonly oral drugs, to dogs. So it's very quick. You pop it in the bowl, and the dogs eat it up in a few seconds, and then on down the road. So if that was how it occurred, that's probably the route of administration, and I'm sure it was pretty quick and painless. And almost certainly, you had mentioned it happening at White Mountain. Almost certainly that's where they would get a meal like that. Almost certainly they would not get a big meal at safety, since it's only about 6 or 8 hours or so from Nome at that point. So they probably got a pretty hearty snack, which is almost always fish or some type of meat that's cut up into about the size of a Snicker bar, and they're giving their snacks in that way. So it would be very difficult to go down the line of a dog team and not only give a snack but also administer pills on the trail, not to mention, having to take off all of your gear, your gloves, and all of that stuff compared to the weather. It would be difficult to do it in a location outside of White Mountain, or if it was done in Nome. So those are my thoughts on that. Can I give my third opinion on this and maybe talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I have a quick question for you about Tramadol.
Okay. My third opinion about this is I think it is time, and I know we've talked about this before on the show over the years. I think more than ever it is time for the mushers to form some type of union, association, something where they have some bargaining power to deal with things with the Iditarod Trail Committee. I know that they have the Finishers Club, but I don't think that they have bargaining power like they would in a union with collective bargaining agreement, et cetera, et cetera. If you think about every other professional sport in this country, they have some type of union. The NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, professional soccer, all of those have a union in order to have a say at the table when they're dealing with the governing body of their sport. And then, of course, there is strength in numbers in that point. If they had the ability to negotiate a bargaining agreement of some sort, I think that would help, because of right now, it is 80-some-odd mushers in a typical year on their own going up against the corporation or the nonprofit or whatever the ITC is, and it's a whole bunch of individuals with all of their own personal interests against one entity. And I think that that's a big problem. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it would be, because it's a relatively small sport as an entity, it might be difficult to get that off the ground, but it definitely would make things a lot better for the mushers. And I think that would also, they have representatives on the ITC board, but my sense is that there's not as you said, there's not the same kind of power that you would get with a collective bargaining thing. And that not only applies to sports, but if you think about, government workers generally are in unions. Police in large cities are generally in unions. So that makes a lot of sense to me. My question for you about Tramadol, though, is that a drug that you have to get a prescription for, or is that over the counter, or is it relatively easy to get even if you do need a vet to give you a prescription for it?
In my history, I believe I have always been prescribed those types of medications. Now, there are many medications that we can buy over the counter, especially with companies that deal with mushers all the time. Obviously, or it isn't obvious, for a lot of folks that are listening, most people that are listening, time their dog is sick or injured, they take their dog to the vet. And when they take their dog to the vet, they have to have an examination. They have to have, very similar to, the way people work. You have to go to the doctor. You sit down with them. They tell you what's wrong. They prescribe you the meds. The way that it works in mushing is we have a very good relationship with our veterinarians. And I can call up my veterinarian right now and say, hey, I need this, that, or other. And as long as it is not a controlled substance, they will pretty much take what I have to say as face value, and I will either pick it up at the vet's office, or they will call it into a pharmacy. And nowadays many human pharmacies prescribe or fill dog drugs, and we just go down to the pharmacy and pick it up. The only thing, to my knowledge, that they will not prescribe are controlled substances and vaccines like rabies, et cetera, et cetera. If we took our dogs to the vet as pet people take their dogs to the vet, we would have multiple thousands of dollars in vet visits for relatively small incidences that would put just about every kennel in the world out of business just on that one item. So, yeah, I don't think first off, I don't know if it's a controlled substance. Is it, Alex? Do you know?
I am not sure. I literally had never heard of it until relatively recently.
Okay. Yeah, I don't believe it is, but as I mentioned, most of the time I'll just say, hey, we need this or that, and I'll get it, they'll fill it or have it available, and I'll just pick it up at the vet office. So we have about 10 minutes left. We do have another breaking story I want to mention, but any other news you want to mention? 7 minutes, Alex. Any other news you want to mention on this doping case? It's very interesting that it has grown the legs that it has, and it is now a national story with outlets like NPR and ESPN and other big media outlets who very rarely talk about dog sports are now, it's a major story, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, just as in political scandals, they say it's not always the underlying thing, the underlying crime. It's the cover-up that really gets people in trouble and really is what becomes a huge scandal. So at this point, I would think that whoever the musher is, that he or she should come forward, have a press conference, give an interview, whatever, should come forward almost immediately. We're starting to get to the point where if it doesn't happen relatively soon, it is going to be very, very difficult when it it does happen, and the person is going to look like he or she is hiding something and will be presumed guilty. I think there's still a little bit of time to get ahead of the story, but it's running out. So that would be my thought, is that whoever did this really should come forward very quickly.
Okay, I want to end the show with sort of fan thoughts on this. We did that last week, and I want to make sure we cover that as well. But I do want to let our listeners know that if something does come out, hopefully Alex and I can get back together on the show to talk about it and give our thoughts and opinions about it for what they matter. I've gotten a lot of questions over the last week or so about our show, and it's interesting that our show has been downloaded and listened to more often in the last week or so than it probably ever has. So I think people are really looking to us for our updates and our opinions, which is a great sign of respect for us. So I really appreciate that. Real quickly, Alex, another news story broke just before we went on tonight is Iditarod finisher Jason Mackey has been charged with a misdemeanor count of stealing dog crates from another musher at this same Nome dog lot after the race this year. Evidently, the person who he stole them from was Al Ishans, who was also running Iditarod. And interesting enough is the assistant district attorney up in Nome, Tom Jamogian, I believe is how you say his name. He has been on the show as well. He is the district attorney for this case. I wonder how that fits in to, differences of opinion and that sort of thing. Quickly, what are your thoughts on that? I do want to say that innocent until proven guilty. It is a misdemeanor, and it's going to be a while before they have an end to this story. But we wanted to let our listeners know, what's happening, because it's just yet another story in this crazy off-season of Iditarod. Do you have a quick thought on that? And then I want to get your perspective on sort of this whole doping scandal and Mushing X scandal, as we're calling it, here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I am hoping that it is some sort of misunderstanding, because it seems like there would be so much attention that could be paid to this, and that it seems like if you're going to steal something from a fellow musher, this is exactly the wrong thing to steal at exactly the wrong place. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I am very hopeful that it is some sort of misunderstanding, and that it's not what it might appear to be. And as you said, we in this society we have the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So so that's my hope for that.
Mine as well. I definitely hope that it was just something where, somebody said, yeah, you can borrow these crates to ship your dogs home, and either didn't let the other musher know. Again, it could be a handler or someone else that is making the decisions. I think that there seems to be a lot of decision-making in checkpoints and things these days where it should be only left up to the musher, and that's a show for another day. That we could definitely talk about, because I think that the mushers should be the only ones making the decisions on the care of their dogs. Quickly, Alex, 2 minutes left. What are your overriding thoughts now that we're about a week and a half into this doping and Musher X scandal as we see it from a fan's perspective only? Does any opinion change to this point compared to last week? And what are your thoughts going forward, other than what you said about we hope that Musher X comes forward and says his or her piece, and we can move on from this? This
whole thing and these little, the sort of drip of these negative stories and this bad news doesn't reflect well on the sport. And we're at a time where there's a lot of challenges facing the sport in terms of climate change, in terms of financial things, and in terms of animal rights activists having a renewed focus on the sport. So anything that is happening that is negative is going to have more of an impact now than it might have a couple of years ago. So my thought is that really the mushers and the Iditarod need to start getting ahead of these things and not having it be, something where every few days there will be some other negative story.
And the reason I ask you this is I had at least two people message me on social media or by email in the last week or two, and they asked me pretty directly. They said, do you think this is the end of Iditarod as we know it? And these were fans. They were not anybody involved with mushing whatsoever. They were strictly fans of the sport. What are your thoughts on that particular question from a fan's perspective? Do you think that in any stretch of imagination, stories like this, as they're developing, could be the end of Iditarod as we know it going forward?
I think it would take a lot more than what we have now, but what I am afraid of is that there will be a pattern of a bunch of these stories, and that at some point we'll reach a critical mass and people will stop supporting it, or they'll stop believing in the integrity of the race, and I think that could be catastrophic. I think we're a long way away from that, and I would just like us not to be on that road, because it feels like even though we're a long way away from that, we've started along that road, and I would like us to be along the road where we're heading towards a sustainable and healthy Iditarod instead of people wondering if Iditarod is going to go away.
And Alex, we always compare and contrast on our show with the other major sports, and I think all of us know that the NFL is a different sport than we knew it several years ago, especially with all of this national anthem coverage that they've gotten and all of the domestic violence abuse that's come about, and all of those arrests that people are getting arrested for, this, that, and whatnot. The NFL is definitely a different sport than it has been in the last decade or so. But what's interesting to that is it is a mega sport, in America, and it's kind of oversaw by this one governing body. And it's the players in that body where the issues arise. It's not necessarily the corporation itself or the sport itself. And I'm seeing a little bit of a comparison there. We have the Iditarod body as a whole, but then we have all of these little tentacles that are, causing a fuss as we speak. Of course, that's human nature. There will always be bad apples in the bunch, but I think, just like the NFL has tried to do, is they need to stop the bleeding. They need to come up with a very proactive public relations campaign to deal with this, or there are going to be fans in particular that begin to trickle away. They may not yet, but if they continue to see all of these negative stories erupt, I think that within it won't take long for fans to just say, you know what, I can take my entertainment views elsewhere, and there's a lot of ways to spend our time, and if we're watching a tainted product, so to speak, that it could definitely have an impact on the way fans follow the race. At least that's my opinion. Hopefully it does not happen like that. Hopefully they are able to nip this in the bud and deal with it as quickly as possible and move on, because we're only 140-odd days away from the next race. So we got to make sure that things are happening diligently and quickly, or otherwise this is going to go well into the next mushing season, and I don't think any of the fans want that. Any closing remarks, Alex, before we close?
I think you said it pretty much perfectly. The only thing that I would add is that the big difference between Iditarod and the NFL is the NFL is a multi-billion-dollar industry that has a considerable amount of reserves. The Iditarod has always been a much, much smaller financially industry, and something that in many years has sort of run a little bit by the seat of its pants. So the NFL can absorb shocks that the Iditarod just can't.
Right. It's still the big daddy in the room, though, so we got to make sure that we keep that in mind as well. They're the ones that are driving the sport, so to speak, just like the NFL is in football. So yeah, I agree with you, Alex. Let's keep on top of this, and we're interested to hear what our fans and friends have to say with this. We're talking about what we're titling the Doping and Musher X episode here on Mushing Radio. So if you want to tag us with that or ask your questions about that on social media, you can ask using that title, and we'll try our best to get back at it. And if something else happens, we'll do our best to get back on the show and provide our analysis, I guess, is the better way to call than opinion. Alex, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us on our off day, and we'll keep in touch, okay?
Okay. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host, Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our DogWorks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about DogWorks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
DogWorks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. DogWorks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dog Works at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.